I nearly had a heart attack. I've got 2 barky dogs. Peg. Normally,
mine are outside the door.
So we're just waiting for people to come through. Welcome everyone. We're just waiting for participants to come in. So we're up to 30 people so far. I hope you've all got a cup of tea. I hope you've got a brew. That's the most important thing today.
A broom?
I hope you've all got your broom. So I said a cup of tea for everybody around the world, and I said a brew for anybody in Greater Manchester.
Brew.
Yeah, not a broom, but I do hope that people have got their brooms.
I thought you were.
Maybe this is all Halloween. Go on, sorry.
Yeah. I thought you were implying that we were witches.
Yeah, me too. Male and female, gender-free witches.
We're all witches. You'll be glad to know that our friend Natalie has said hi to us all. Hi, Natalie.
Hi, Natalie.
Hi, Natalie.
Well,
so, half an hour? How long should I do? Half an hour?
Do half an hour, yeah. Okay, so welcome everyone. I'm going to make a start. We haven't got everyone on yet, but let's make a start, and then hopefully the other people will join us. So welcome to our 9th conversation with. This is with Dr. John Zeisel. We're going to start with a film as an introduction to today's seminar. So I'm just going to play that now for you all.
Over 50 million people in the world are living with dementia, with an estimate of 10 million diagnosed every year. According to the Alzheimer's Association, 5.7 million people in the United States are diagnosed with some form of dementia. And as baby boomers reach 85 years of age, the numbers will double.
I see the public narrative of despair circling dementia. That is the prominent public narrative around this condition today. That's what's changing. We're changing from despair to hope. I know I can make a difference. Once you do that, the result, which is the goal of it all, is we have a relationship with that person.
Oh, your nickname is Kathleen. Is your
The understanding that people living with dementia are still here is creating a cultural transformation that is desperately needed. This film shows examples of how people living with dementia can still be empowered and engaged in long-term care communities by using the fundamental philosophy of person-centered care. Our hope is this philosophy will be commonplace in the near future.
I'm sorry, my life, all my life.
Mr. Emmett, let's go to the bathroom and brush your teeth, and let's start the day, all right? Okay, hold my hand. Just walk with me. That's it. I'll sit right next to you. Have your toothbrush here. Have a toothpaste on. There you go. Just step a little bit closer to the sink so you can brush your teeth for me.
Well-being is beyond physical care. It's social and emotional and spiritual. And it's like, you know, let me be who I am and know me. That whole relationship-based kind of care and culture can make a tremendous difference in the person's journey and in the whole family's journey.
I thought we were really special since we had a picture made in the studio. I think I was 5 years old there in that picture.
My mother, she's a very big jokester, and so she has running jokes with someone. She can't remember their names, but she remembers the way they make her feel.
You want to get up here? Oh, that's the sweetest one. Give me kisses.
She looks younger and looks healthier than she has in years. It's amazing, the difference. Amazing, the difference. her mind is sharper. They make her feel special by treating her with respect. And I love the fact that she realizes that she matters. Her life matters. That's huge.
When people feel they belong and are part of a group, they have a sense of comfort and will feel more confident and secure in their surroundings.
I appreciate you guys helping me out. How do you define being successful?
The 5 things we know work for people with dementia that affect the way our brains work are diet, exercise, the amount of sleep we get, reducing stress, and the last one is meaning and purpose in life.
More than money. Would you agree with that? Absolutely.
Reduce stress and purpose work because they also reduce inflammation in our bodies. And the key to really stopping dementia from progressing to more severe stages is stopping inflammation in our bodies. Using dance, using theater, using all of these artistic methods is a way to help people's brains continue to function, to be engaged, to enjoy themselves, which is a really important thing, to reduce their depression, to overcome their physical disabilities. It seems like magic, but it should be just normal. It's the way we do things.
Got broke after all.
The mid-stage group, we have what we call music and movement. Every morning, we do it 7 days a week. Procedurally, it's very engaging and energizing, and the music is lively, and it gets people going in the morning. The residents find comfort in having a routine of the day. So every morning starts with that morning gathering, and then we break off into our various groups throughout the day.
Masterson Dorothy, oh, there she is. I usually look for you over there.
If you have a strength, if you have something that you're special at, we want to have you be able to do that because that's what makes you feel like I'm important, right? And I still matter. And so being able to give people that individualization is really a key principle of I'm still here.
3/4 cups of confectionery.
Supporting the individual choices of the resident can create a strong relationship with the staff. Consistent and familiar care partners who really know the person can help ease anxieties and creates a bond based on trust.
And roll it.
And roll it.
There. Good job, Joe.
The relationship that you have with the people that you live with and the people that work there is extremely important. And with every good relationship, you need to take time to nurture that relationship.
Okay, so that was a glimmer of some of the work that John is involved with. So I'm just going to introduce myself. My name's Emma Smith. I'm the project manager of Empowered Conversations over in Salford in Greater Manchester, the UK. We deliver communication courses across Greater Manchester for family carers and people with dementia to help improve their connections and their relationships. And we also deliver something called Empowered Carers, which is one-to-one support for family carers via Zoom, so on a online platform like this. And I suppose the reason that we're doing what we're doing today is because of COVID, and obviously that's affected everybody here today. And our response to that has been to put on more online groups, online activities to engage people. So that's carers and people with dementia. And also we sort of got cracking with putting on seminars. So a weekly seminar. This is our 9th seminar, which is amazing. We never expected that we'd ever do this. So that's what we've been doing during lockdown. So John, will you just, obviously you've had a bit of an introduction with the film, but do you want to just introduce yourself to everyone?
I'm John Zeisel. I was a visiting professor at Salford, which is one of the ways I know Emma and Joy. Joy was on the advisory committee of the Salford Dementia Institute, where I was critical. And I have written a book called I'm Still Here. which is the approach I'm going to be talking about, except that I'm going to be talking about a second book actually today and different ideas. I do two things. I have a foundation called I'm Still Here Foundation that supports the development of non-pharmacologic, what we call eco-psychosocial programs for people living with dementia, as well as manage a company called Hearthstone Alzheimer Care, which, as you saw, provides life and living for people with dementia in what in the States is called an assisted living, but in the UK would be a rest home. And you saw some of the people dancing and being involved with the kind of programs that we institute.
Brilliant. Thank you, John. And Joy, will you just introduce yourself as well, please?
Yeah, I'm Joy Watson, and I'm still involved with the Dementia Institute at Salford University, which I still really get involved in. I'm also part of Age UK, and occasionally get involved with Empowered Conversations. So that's me.
Brilliant. Thank you, Joy. And we've had some really nice hellos from everyone. We've got international. We've got Ali from Wales. We've got Karen up in Oldham. Who else have we got? And we've got, I just saw, who have we got from France? Fanny from France as well. So welcome everyone. This is a fantastic seminar for you today. So the plan for today is that John will do his presentation, and then we'll come back and we'll have a discussion, and then we'll move pretty swiftly into a Q&A where you'll all get an opportunity to ask us a question or make a point. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, if you haven't seen it before, there's a Q&A button there. So at any time, just pop your question in there rather than think, oh, I'll do it at the end and then forget. So you can pop your question in the Q&A at the bottom. Okay, I think we're ready to get started. Okay, everyone? All right.
So first of all, let me thank Emma for creating this opportunity. It's good to have a conversation, but it's even better to have an empowered conversation. And that means inviting Joy, who is a person living with dementia, to be part of this. I've known Joy for many years, and I'm very pleased you're here. In the little film snippet you saw, there is a mention of person-centered care. This is a term that has been very popular for many years. And when, years ago in the UK, when I was working actually to develop the dementia programs north of London, I would turn to doctors and to caregivers and say, well, do you practice person-centered care? And to a person, they all said, oh, yes, of course. And when I said, what do you do to put person-centered care, this Tom Kitwood phrase, into action, they didn't really have much to say. They just said, well, it's all person-centered care. I pay attention to the person. Well, what I'm going to talk about today is a way of thinking about person-centered care in operation, putting it into place, and the background of it, and what you need in order to have this wonderful concept of person-centered care. So the basis of the work I'm doing, and you also heard in the video a little bit, if those of you who could hear it well enough, the term engagement and the term well-being. You had somebody, Al Power, a colleague of mine, talk about that as well. So this picture that you have on the screen is a summary of everything I believe in today. Hopefully I'll believe in it tomorrow. I didn't know about it last week, so I'm going to stress this. So the three-part engagement program, and I'm calling it engagement theory, even though there's a lot of evidence behind it. A theory is a model of putting it all together that seems to function. The first part is that the goal is well-being. The goal of all of this, that arrow into the middle, is what we're talking about, and I'll describe more what well-being means as we go on. The second part, and this is the most important, is that in order to have a person-centered care engagement program, you need 3 elements. And I'm going to talk about all 3 of these. The first is you need an environment. The environment has to be one that supports the person, supports the engagement, and creates the opportunity to engage. It's the context within which this takes place. The second thing you need is the oil, the mechanism to make it work, to make the pieces work together, and that's communication. You need to be able to communicate with the people involved, and that means understanding physical communication, body language, as well as words, as well as how to use words, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. And the third is that within that environment, using the communication that we know is needed, is to focus on engagement. Engagement as the goal, not engagement as the means. This is very important too. So that's the picture. The engagement theory basically says you can achieve well-being by having an environment that creates the opportunity to engage, the communication that provides the oil enabling engagement to take place, and engagement, which is the goal in itself to achieve health and well-being. I'm going to talk all about this and actually come back to this diagram in a moment. So the model underlying person-centered care, and I always say when I think about Tom Kitwood, that who died very early in his life, that had he not died, I would not be doing what I'm doing, because I think much of what I do is based on his thinking and underlying the person-centered care work in Dementia Reconsidered, the book he wrote. And all this is based on what I call the hope model. The hope model embraces the present. It says we are in the present. We are with what we can do. I can do what I can do. Emma can do what she can do. Joy can do what she can do. We have to be in the present. I've got physical illnesses. Emma might have them. Joy has a dementia. We don't have to say, oh, isn't it great? We can be sad. It can influence us, but we live with it. And the important part of the hope model is seeing the person, appreciating that person's abilities. Not what still exists, but what exists. Doing things together, not separating off, staying connected. What happens is that by being connected, you create greater engagement. People are happier, calmer, more confident, more in control, and the relationships are better. Kitwood talks about the importance of the I and the thou in the relationship. And that it's important to have the relation, it's not just the person, it's the relationship of the person. So the hope model embraces the present. I believe that this underlies all good care and treatment. The inverse of that is what I would call, what I call the popular public narrative of today. It's called the despair narrative. And it's what underlies everything where people talk about patients needing treatment to challenge behaviors, to fix challenging behaviors because there's something wrong. The first underlying concept of the despair model is that is what we call in social sciences a self-fulfilling prophecy. Namely, if you believe things are going to get worse and it's all downhill from there, it does get worse. And it is not downhill from there because you start to behave that way. The despair model starts by seeing the negative, what someone can't do, what someone finds difficulty doing in certain situations. Worry about the future. Don't be in the present. Oh, the future is going to be terrible. People get sad, they become inactive, they abandon the relationship, and anxiety, apathy, aggression, loneliness, agitation all increase. It comes from an attitude, and the despair model is an attitude that brings these things about. It's not a good description of life with dementia. It's a description of our brains and what we think is going on. So going along with these despair model and hope model are several myths, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about them, but basically the despair myths are People with dementia can't remember. People with dementia can't pay attention for a long time. People with dementia are going to be aggressive some point in their life. There's an aggressive phase. A third is that people with dementia don't know who they are. They lose their identity. There is no sense of self. The fifth is that people with dementia, because they forget things, can't enjoy themselves. The seventh is, of course, they can't make decisions. They can't decide. How can somebody who can't remember things decide? And also, there's no learning involved. People with dementia can't learn. Those are the despair myths. If you believe these, you are taking life away from people rather than providing the context for care and love and respect and dignity. I could go through all the hope truths. I'm just going to mention them. People can remember. Before we started this program, I reminded Joy of a presentation she made several years ago, and holding up a shampoo bottle and a conditioner bottle, pointing them to the audience and say, when I'm in the shower, I can't remember which one is which. But she remembered the event because I said, I learned so much by seeing you do that. People with some dementia can focus if they're interested. I'm going to use you, Joy, but it could be anybody. If someone's interested in something, in a painting, in music, in a book, in a topic, in a conversation, they focus. You don't need what they can't do is focus when there's no interest. There is not always an aggressive phase, but people with dementia lose a bit of the hippocampal impulse control. So that if somebody gets angry, instead of holding it back, like one of you might have been angry because the video that we just saw was a little bit choppy, you don't write in things saying everything's terrible, I'm going to get furious, but somebody with dementia might express that anger more. Lose their identity, no sense of self is total nonsense. We never forget who we are. We may forget a name, we may forget a date, we may forget an event, but I know I'm me, Em knows she's her, and Joy knows she's her. And those of you who are listening who have family members with dementia, they know who they are. It's up to us to find the key to find that self and to communicate and be in relationship with that self. The fifth one is you can't enjoy, but you can. Because people remember, as I remember films I've seen, I don't necessarily remember every dialogue, every individual, every actor. I remember what the film was about. I remember the gist of it. People with dementia remember the feelings, the gist. They might also remember the specifics, but they will remember, I remember the gist of Joy's conversation and Joy's presentation at that conference at Salford many years ago. I don't remember exactly the words. I do remember that one example, but we remember the gist, and we can enjoy the feeling, and we can enjoy the gist of what we remember of a film, of music, of a conversation, of an evening. Can't decide. Of course you can't decide if you're presented with 100 different choices. We can all make decisions, and they're easier for us with or without dementia, the simpler they are. So binary decisions. Do you want to go here? Do you want to go there? Would you like to have bangers and mash? Would you like to have scrambled eggs? Would you like to have, would you like to wear the white dress you're wearing, Joy, or would you like to wear the red, pinkish, whatever this is, pinkish sweater that I'm wearing today? Those are decisions everybody can make, no matter what the dementia is. And the final one is learning. We have two learning processes. One is called episodic learning, where we have to remember facts. The other is called procedural learning. It's where we remember by doing. So when you ride a bicycle, and I have a grandson who has a bicycle with no pedals, and he uses the feet to move along the bicycle along, and then all of a sudden we received from his mother or father a video where he lifted his feet up, and he's riding the bicycle without pedals, just lifts his feet up and goes down the path, because he's learning procedurally. Nobody said lift your feet up. So riding a bicycle, playing golf, knitting, playing music, singing songs. These are all learned by doing. And so people with dementia can learn. So those are the hope truths. All of us, with or without dementia, can remember, can focus, have low impulse control. We have to control ourselves, have a sense of self, can enjoy the gist of things, can make decisions, and can learn. That's the basis of not only the hope truths, but of all the engagement theory. Now, one of the insidious factors of this despair model, and it's a despair model that is sold by many organizations, by many people trying to sell medications, by many people who want to raise money, and by many people who just are worried about their family member, is that it increases stigma. In other words, if you believe that the person next to you can't do this and can't do this and can't do this and can't do that, while you can, you stigmatize them. So the public narrative of dementia, to a large degree, is stigmatized. It costs a lot of money. People are afraid. People are more afraid in all the surveys of living with a dementia than they are of getting and dying of cancer. So one of the reasons to shift from the despair to the hope model is also to take the stigma off the people we love, but also off ourselves when we're caring for those people. So, as I said, the goal of engagement theory, the goal of environment, communication, and engagement, although engagement is a goal in itself, is well-being. And you heard on the little video Al Power speaking about well-being, and I'd just like to go into the characteristics of well-being that engagement induces. Emma? They are, and these come directly from Al Power's book. He's a colleague and a friend and a brilliant analyst and presenter. Our identity. This goes back to knowing who a person is, knowing who they are. Security, feeling safe physically, feeling safe emotionally, feeling safe in the context you are in. Connectedness. I talked about the importance of relationship, of the I-thou relation. Connectedness to other people, connectedness to society, connectedness to the people we're with. The fourth is autonomy. I'll be talking about choice. In engagement. I'll be talking about self-directed engagement. All of this is a form of autonomy. It doesn't mean I'm totally independent of everything. I personally am not totally independent of my family, of my wife, of my friends, of my children, of my grandchildren. I'm dependent on them for many, many things. It doesn't mean I've lost my autonomy. The fifth one is meaning, and I spoke about the importance, and I will continue to speak about the importance of meaning in engagement. Engagement is not just doing something. It's not just moving one thing around to another place. Engagement is meaningful, loving attention and mindfulness on something. And so it must have meaning. The sixth category is growth. Growth can be thought of as learning. Growth can be thought of as greater connectedness, more connections to other people. And in honor of our participant, the last one is joy, because well-being includes a positive feeling. Well-being includes happiness. Well-being includes joy. We must stop thinking about the goal of dementia care as being avoiding the problems versus what this says, which is creating a positive context. I have a colleague, Maggie Calkins, who saw a presentation I was making on the despair narrative, the hope narrative, and in it I had things like less anxiety, less agitation, and she said, no, John, put the positive stuff there, put joy, put meaning, put connectedness in. We're not trying to reduce the negative, we're trying to encourage the positive. So I mentioned three factors: environment, communication, and engagement. I'm going to not stress environment and communication because I've done that in many things and also written about it, but I will go quickly through them. The first is the environment needs to create a context for the person with dementia, as well as the care partners, that feels safe, that is understandable. The term we use, and it's in I'm Still Here, is naturally mapped. In other words, when any of us walk into an environment where we know exactly what is going on, then we feel more comfortable than if there's corners we have to go around to see what's happening, doors we have to go through in order to find out what's behind them. So the safety comes from making sure that the places that are dangerous to get to are not evident and inviting. The fact that people can see where they're going, where the destinations are, that they have place for themselves. This is this independence and a sense of self. The common spaces are clear as to what their use is. Being in a residential setting, whether it's small residence, large residence, but not a huge institution, and then making sure that the sensory input, that there's less clutter and more sensory understanding of the environment. So the environment has to be supportive. If the environment is not supportive, you can't have engagement. The second critical element in the engagement theory is communication. By communication, we're talking about how do we talk to each other. I'm just going to skip around. Asking permission. Before I would ask Emma a personal question about her life, I'd say, is it all right if I ask you some questions about your life? She can say, no, I don't like doing that. That would be the end of the conversation. Or she could say, yes, but I'd rather we didn't talk about where I'm living, or something of that sort. The second is eye contact. It's very important to look someone in the eye, not so that you know what's going on in their eyes, but people read your emotion, what your intent is, through eye contact. So standing behind someone and pulling a chair out from the table does not make eye contact. Offering choices. I talked about independence, making decisions, always offering binary choices. Talking more slowly, using words that the person would use in their life from their culture, being respectful, being kind, never using quizzing or challenging questions, never saying, Joy, do you remember the example you gave when you gave that presentation? That's not something that's going to get an answer. Saying, I remember this, isn't that an interesting thing, gives Joy the opportunity to say yes or no. It's not a quiz or a challenging question. And the last one being focusing on engagement. And so let's switch to engagement now, which is the third element to create well-being. Engagement has 5 major elements. The first is that engagement means paying attention and being mindful. All of our abilities, our brains have evolved and were created to engage, to be mindful of our context, to figure things out. It is the key to human survival. And engagement is not an extra in life. It is what we do. It's how we get through the day. We wake up and say, what's the day going to be like? And we get engaged in that. The second is that our brains have inside hardwired domains, like some people call them instincts. So it's vital to build engagement on what our brains have in this hardwiring. Hardwiring is something we're born with. It's like in the computer you have in front of you, there's a motherboard. It's not called a fatherboard, it's a motherboard, and that motherboard has wires in it. It's not the program, it's not Microsoft, it's not Intel, it's the hard stuff. We're born with that. Then we learn, and then we have families, then they treat a certain way. But the hard wiring domains, tailored to a person's cultural context, include such things as caring for other people, include such things as song, which is a some people say is a precursor to language. Another thing is this procedural learning, the ability to learn through doing. And the ability to do something in it. So inviting participants to help do everything. So it's not doing for, it's doing with. The third is physical environment to increase engagement, which means arranging the group, if it's a group, in a way that supports it, like being in a circle if it's a conversation, being around a table if there's something to do, being in a line if there's something you want to pass down the line. And the other is what I call manipulables, namely something to hold at each phase of the engagement, so that you're not just sitting with your hands and knowing what to do, but rather we have a cup of coffee in the morning, so we have something to talk with. But what I mean is drumsticks when there's music, or a tambourine if there's music, or a rubber ball. You saw one of these squeezy balls in the video. So something to touch. And all spiritual movements, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, others, Buddhism, all have something that people, when they're praying or when they're meditating, there's always something in the hands. There's always worry beads, or there's rosary, or there's so it's connected. When we do something with our hands, it also impacts our brains. The last is standardizing and ritualizing communication. So we always introduce ourselves by name. We always say to the person, "Hi, I'd like to meet. Hi, Joy, it's nice to see you. Emma, I'm glad you're here." And even if later on I say, "Emma, what do you think?" I would never say, "What do you think?" I'd say, always give her name, and always echoing a quiet person. If there's somebody quiet, saying, "Mary says," so that she participates as well. And the final form of communication is something we call threading, namely going with the flow of whatever it is, as if you're pulling a thread out of a cloth, which is wherever anybody goes, you go with it. It's engagement. It's not getting it right. And that's the last point. Engaging a group is an end in itself. There is no, you're playing chess wrong. You answered the question wrong. It's always, wasn't that an interesting question, right or wrong? So I mentioned, and I'm getting towards the end of my presentation, I mentioned that purpose and meaning is one of the 5 elements, and that the 5 elements we know to create a difference in people's lives, our own lives as well as others with dementia and others with any kind of condition, is exercise to get our bodies going, diet, what we eat and not eating, eating antioxidants, eating not eating too much fat, etc. Sleeping. We now know that we need to sleep 7 to 8 hours a day, and that those people who say, I don't need that much sleep, I can get by on 3 hours sleep, it's like smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. The 4th one on the right-hand side here is reducing stress. Stress causes inflammation. Inflammation increases all of the problems we have. And then the 5th one, which is coming more and more to the fore and more the basis of engagement, is purpose and meaning. Creativity in the arts, learning, being part of community, being an expert, caring for others, taking care of yourself, taking care of your home. These are all the elements of meaning and purpose. So those are the 5 dimensions of making a difference in people's lives: exercise, sleep, diet, reducing stress, and purpose. I'm only going to go quickly and say these are the kinds of programs that we have. So one is going to the movies and watching small tidbits of film, which people may remember, but also have very strong emotional impact. And that now is all over the country here, but also we're developing that in France under the name of Cinémoire. Another is music and emotion, programs that connect the music to the emotion that they are engendering, so that there's meaning behind it for the people. Teaching children. An engagement program could be Emma, myself, Joy, teaching something to children that we know about. Maybe we're going to teach them about dementia. Maybe we'll just teach them about reading. Maybe I've never asked Joy what you'd like to teach if you had a little class of children who'd come visit you every day. What would you tell them? You know, would you tell them stories about your childhood? Would you tell them about things you like to do? But it's meaningful to people to teach others. We just finished, and I'll finish this part of this with a program at something called the Windrush Farm in Massachusetts, called an equine engagement program. And we've developed it so that it's not a matter of getting on a horse and riding. It's learning about your horse. It's learning the name. It's starting to get a relationship with the horse. It's putting something on the horse, helping the person put the saddle on the horse. It's brushing the horse. And eventually it's turning the horse over to a young person to ride. So you can have the feeling of saying, I've prepared this horse to be ridden by that lovely young man. So there are all of these programs. When I talk about engagement, I'm talking about meaningful, deep, loving engagement. I'm not talking about activities. I think this is the end of the presentation. I just wanted to reformulate that what we talk about engagement theory is achieving well-being through environments that give the opportunity to engage, through communication, which provides the engagement opportunities and sort of the oil to the machine. And the third is the engagement, which is when the machine is working, people are engaged, people are mindful, people are using their brains the way they were created and evolved to be used, and the goal and the result is well-being. So engagement replacement theory essentially says if we can create engagement opportunities for people, it will replace many of those despair narrative activities and behaviors that people engage in because they're not engaged and they're not treated with respect and dignity, which is what people need to move forward in life well. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, John. Thank you so much. We've got people who have been very active in the chat, and I'm just going to encourage people to start popping any questions that you might have down in the Q&A if you can. We've got about 15 minutes for questions and answers, so I'm just going to encourage
why don't you read somebody and just ask them to do it? I think it might help.
Well, I'm gonna. So
and I'll give short answers.
Okay. All right. So we've just had lots of lovely comments really from people. So thank you for the informative presentation, John. Love the focus on engagement, John. Can you say a bit more about its benefits, please? That's from Phil McAvoy.
So, Phil, I don't know if I answered more of it after you posted that question. The benefits of engagement are that it replaces boredom, it replaces apathy, it replaces the feeling that you have to do an activity. For everyone. So that, for example, in this presentation, I had to figure out how many slides I could show, how many PowerPoint slides. I had to think of what would be engaging to talk about in this format, so that you were interested enough to ask a question. So the benefits are a form of mindfulness. It stops us from worrying about the future. It stops us from regretting the past. It's a form of being in the present, which underlies the hope model. So the reason for the engagement is to also demonstrate to the rest of the world what people can do so that relationship can be built. In Canberra, in Australia, years ago when we were implementing the Meet Me at the Museum program at the National Gallery of Australia in Canberra, one person was sitting there with his wife and said, "Oh, I studied with the painter that painted that painting." They'd been married 30 years. And the woman said, "I never knew that. Isn't that interesting?" And she never asked, and she didn't know. But now she knew there was all this memory there. So, that's the benefit. The benefit is it replaces those behaviors, those things that that we don't want to live with. And it's what we need, all of us need every day just to get through the day and use our brains.
Brilliant. Thank you. I think we do get hung up, and I think I used the word activity earlier. I hope I didn't say activity. I hope I said engagement, but we do get hung up on that. We have to provide an activity for someone. What we're actually saying is we want to engage somebody in this. Are you interested?
That's right.
Which is a much better rather than
big difference.
Massive.
It's simple. It's a simple shift, but it's a big, massive change.
It is. Joy, have you got anything you want to? The questions are starting to fire in now. So before I start asking too many questions, have you got any thoughts you want to share with us?
I suppose the thing that jumps out at me is to ask those of us living with dementia some of the stuff that we want to do. I mean, 6-7 years ago when we started up our young onset group, that was the focus, and everyone said we want to do something that's fun. We don't want to sit and play bingo for a packet of biscuits. So we did what most people wanted to do. You know, we went temping bowling and we went on the bumper cars and just things that you wouldn't think people with dementia would be excited about. But just ask us what we want to do.
Yeah. It sounds so simple, but it's quite often the thing that's forgotten, isn't it? Okay, thank you for that, Joy. All right then. So we've got a question from Natalie about how have the staff at Hearthstone responded to the COVID-19 experience so that engagement is supported?
Well, what we're finding, I mean, there's a sad answer, but what we're finding is that among those with very far advanced dementia, COVID takes hold and is a real killer. So the thing we've done with the dementia programs and while trying to keep people safe are twofold. One is to increase one-on-one engagement when people are in their rooms and when people have to be isolated. Because otherwise somebody with a dementia is not going to just say, oh yeah, I'll just sit in my room. So that was one. And we are developing a tablet, iPad, whatever, tablet-based program to increase engagement one-on-one. The other is we worked with the government to make clear that it's very hard not to have group engagement programs in dementia care in rest homes. So we also have this new app called Group Engage, which allows people to use tablets in a group led by somebody with dementia. So and also have social physical distance. So the answer is we've tried to use engagement within the context of social and physical distance to create worthwhile being the worthwhileness of being together and being alone. But it's been very hard, and I'm sure it's been very hard for others and other places as well.
Thank you for that, John. There was a comment from Susan in Canada. So I live in Canada. Apparently 80% of the COVID fatalities were in senior living residences. Do you think that by employing an engagement theory, it might improve future health outcomes for these people?
I think that the insidiousness of this virus, and I know more unfortunately than most people, is that you can't say I did this, I talked to Joy, Joy did that, therefore these are the 6 people who have it. So the answer is I'm not sure what would have been able to avert the pandemic impact in care homes in Canada, in the United States, in France, in England, in the UK, all over. On the other hand, what the engagement theory can do is make being physically distant, make social distance more acceptable. It can calm people down from worrying constantly and engage them in life, which is what we need to be. And we have to learn how to live with these disasters, not run away from them. We try to avoid them. So the engagement does help, but I don't know whether it would help necessarily with the virus, because it's an insidious connection.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you, Susan.
So David's asked, can two people with dementia use these steps towards engagement together?
Yes.
That's a lovely
Which
answer.
David was that?
David Kerr.
Which David? Okay, so the answer is absolutely. There's absolutely no reason why this relationship that I speak about that's important, and the engagement necessarily needs to be between those of us who think that we are caregivers and have no memory issues and no dementia, to other people. It can obviously be used between groups with dementia, between people with dementia, people. So the answer is absolutely. It's a very good question, David.
Okay, and then over to France now with Fanny. Thanks, John, for this meaningful presentation. Could you be a bit more specific on physical environment? Any recommendation for architects?
So there is a document being written right now, which Fanny, thank you for responding to a little bit, by Alzheimer's Disease International, ADI, located in London and New York. And it's the world report this year is going to be on designing for dementia. And it's being led by Richard Fleming, a colleague of mine in Australia, and Kirsty Bennett, also in Australia, and me are the co-authors, and we're writing a document that will describe it. But the specifics, I would just like to say, it's environments that are safe, environments that are home-like, environments that are not cluttered, and not cluttered visually as well as physically as well as sensorily, environments which support the individual, that support autonomy, that are naturally mapped so you see where you're going and destinations, there aren't dead ends. So those 8 categories that were in this, in that list are the categories. The other thing is that in Inquiry by Design, sorry, that's the other book I wrote. In I'm Still Here, there is a chapter on design which covers those. But the other thing is the work of my colleagues, Richard Fleming and Kirsty Bennett, who have developed principles, and we're not only design direction, but principles that they have to achieve. And we're putting that together in this new report, which will be published sometime in the next few months.
Expertly done there, John, how you got to mention your second book and you made out it was a mistake. Oh, I've written 2 books because Claire did ask.
No. Well, okay, the other book, the first book I wrote was many years ago, a book for designers based on my experience in social science, because I'm a sociologist, research. It was called Inquiry by Design, and that's how to use research and evidence-based and understanding about people in the design process. That was not what I meant. The second book that I am actually writing is outlined in what I did today. It's trying to formulate this theory in all of its complexity, the engagement replacement theory.
Brilliant, thank you. So it was a question actually from Claire. Hi Claire, that you'd mentioned the book, another book. So for anyone who's come along to the seminar today, have we got a date when that book's coming out, John? Not to put any pressure on you, but obviously we've had a glimpse of that theory, but have we got a date yet?
We don't even have a publisher, much less a date. But I'm a strong believer in getting an idea out, and I appreciate and enjoy you listening to, and the rest of all of you listening to this, because what I just presented is the outline.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the book.
Brilliant.
Now I don't have to write it.
Yes, don't worry about it. I'll put it on YouTube. There you go, job done. More people can watch it on there.
That's it. End of book.
We've got
Hi,
another.
Mardell. Nice to have you. Nice to have you with us. I just saw a note from someone.
Oh, brilliant. I know we've got so many positive comments. It's hard to keep on top of them all. We've got another question. Is there a balance between a level of awareness between the despair myths and the hope truths? I.e., is awareness of despair myths, does it help with the hope truths? Did you follow that? That's how it's been written.
I did. No, I did. That's an excellent question. So when I wrote I'm Still Here, I did get from a group in London who were using it as a book, reading group, and they said, "Isn't it too positive? This is not a joyous occasion. This is a condition that people live with. It's not great. The book seems too positive." And I did write an article in response. Sue Benson of the Dementia Care Journal. I think, what's the name of the journal? Can't remember. Anyway, so she said, look, it's too positive, and so I published an article about the importance of understanding the negative as well. But this is a very good question. In other words, in order to embrace the hope model, you really have to understand the impact of the despair model. And in order to implement the hope model, you really need to understand why somebody would say, oh, they can't, out of despair. Because despair is the first thing that happens when you find out you have cancer, or you have dementia, or you have kidney disease and you're going on dialysis, or you have, severe diabetes. You have to understand why someone would start by saying, this is all terrible, it's all horrible, in order to make the change. You can't just say, oh, by the way, let's make it all fine. So it's an excellent question. You do need to understand both sides of this coin to understand the hope model.
Brilliant. Thanks, John. We've got 2 more minutes. We've got 2 more questions. Let's see if we can get them both in. So I should have said we've got a lot of carers and people with dementia who are watching these seminars, which has been an absolute bonus for the work that we've been doing. So we've been able to bring like world-class research and approaches to an audience in Salford. And one of those is Paul. Paul is a carer, and Paul comes on to some of our sessions, and he's put this comment in. In a domestic situation, I thought the environment aspect was right. We've lived here for more than 40 years, but I now feel a more professional approach must be on the horizon. Living together for all those years, we found communication diminished with the years. We knew what each other was thinking, never mind saying. So I must admit a more professional approach seems to be on the horizon, but I don't want to give up. You've made me feel selfish wanting to keep my wife at home. Am I wrong?
Yes, you are wrong to feel selfish. The environment that you are in, your home, probably keeps your wife's memories alive, her abilities alive. If you move her or you or both into another kind of setting, it will require all kinds of work in her brain to get comfortable with it, to get new routines. So it's not selfish at all. Plus, your relationship with her is a vital part of your and her life. There's no reason, if you don't have to give it up, to give it up. So no, I think, in fact, as part of this report, the Alzheimer's Disease International World Report on Design for Dementia, we are surveying people living with dementia and their care partners as to changes they've made in their own environments. So there are ways to make changes in your own home that accommodate life better for the both of you. So you are wrong to feel selfish.
Thank you, John. Joy, have you got any comments on that?
I don't think so, no.
Okay. Barbara is going to have the last question because we're at 3 o'clock. We're going to run over by at least 1 minute, so apologies to everybody. Brilliant presentation as ever, John. Do you have any views on the environment closest, i.e. clothing and clothing protection, which becomes more important in later stages of dementia?
That's also a good question. And in fact, as part of this Design for Dementia report, which I happen to be working on, which is why I mention it, I did reach out to somebody who designs clothing for people with dementia. Now, look, the answer is I don't know enough. So I don't have evidence. Most of what I've talked about, I have an evidence base for. Most of what I've talked about has elements in the neurosciences, or elements in care practice, or elements in Kit Wood's theory, or elements in something else. So I'm not making it up as I go along. The thing about clothing, one thing we do know, and a colleague of mine, Kevin Charas, and others that I teach with at the Sorbonne, by the way, every year we have a course on non-pharmacologic treatment of dementia in French, and he lectures too. He did a study, and they did a study at Bretonneau Hospital of wearing uniforms or not wearing uniforms, the care partners. And the care partners not wearing uniforms and having personal objects around made a lot of difference. So the second is, and I would just say from my experience, that it's not a matter of saying, let's have pants you can take off easily or clothing that you can take off easily. The most important thing is that the clothing and the sequence of the clothing is clear, so that you don't have underwear that looks like outerwear and that someone has to say, I wonder whether I'm supposed to put this on first or second. If it's that clothing is clear, it's the white blouse or the pink blouse, which do you want to wear? So that people have clear choices. I don't know if there's other elements about clothing, but I would say that it's very important, and I think it's worthy of some more research, rather than just saying, you know, let's wear things that are anti-continent, you know, that are bad for that help with continence. I believe that you shouldn't be thinking about protecting ourselves from incontinence as much as we should say, how do we engage people and create environments that increase continence?
Thanks, John. I'm sure Barbara would love to chat to you about that more, because I know she's got a little bit more information around that. Okay, so
I'd be very interested.
All right, I will hook Barbara, John, I will hook you up, not a problem. So I'm gonna bring it to a close now. Thank you so much, John. Thank you so much, Joy. Thanks everyone for coming along today. As I said, this is our 9th The Conversation With. We've got another 3 before we break up for August, and then we'll be back in September. Next week.
When you're finished, I'm going to say goodbye.
Oh, okay. Next week we've got Dr. Izzy Latham, and she's going to be looking at how care home staff learn at the coalface. So they learn through relationships, conversations, and interactions with people with dementia. So that's going to be a really interesting follow-on from this week's job. Go on.
So I would first of all like to thank some of the people who've been chatting. So Tiered, it's really nice to hear from you again. David McFadgen, thank you for joining. Susan, thank you for joining. Everybody who I see responded to my little email, thank you so much. The second thing is, Emma, I really appreciate your inviting me to be part of this. And I think it's a wonderful idea, and I don't think it should only be during COVID times. I think this is the kind of presentation and the kind of interaction we're learning from COVID is very helpful. And Joy, it's such a pleasure to see you again and to hear you. And
thank you.
It's very moving.
Oh, thank you, everybody. Joy, if you got one last, do you want to give us a wave goodbye? Blow John a kiss over the ocean. Right, we will see each other again soon. Thank you so much, everybody. See you later.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.